It's difficult to simplify complex subjects. That's why I'm doing this today. But it's even more difficult to explain a new and innovative technology that is going to change the world in so many different ways. Web3 is so complex and yet still so new. So how do you explain it so that your friends and your family can actually understand it? I'll tell you one thing. If your explanation includes the words decentralization, blockchain, proof of stake, or nodes, then they are not going to get it. You're going to lose them immediately. I've been asking on Twitter, I've been asking in our Discord, how do you explain Web3 simply? And I often see people putting those words in there. And the moment you do that, you're going to lose the mainstream people. So these words just don't make sense to the average person, and nor should they need to understand these words to grasp what Web3 is. Now, I recently spent 1 month back home in Canada visiting friends and family, the first time seeing them since launching the Web3 Academy podcast and newsletter. And so naturally, many of them asked what I was up to and what the new podcast was about. My answer the first few times was absolutely terrible. I was losing people right away. And, I guess it's important to note that most of my friends and family are not big into tech or into, the financial world, right? So like most other people as well. So I started innovating with my explanation on what Web3 was, and I think I found a bit of a breakthrough. It's still not short and perfect like I want, but it is better. And I hope that you will take what I'm about to share with you and kind of iterate on it and maybe even share that back. If you do get our newsletter, make sure to just reply to that newsletter, to that email, and let us know how you would change things. If you're not signed up for the newsletter, make sure to do that. Just go to w3academy.io, or it's also in the show notes below. So firstly, I wanted to get my simple explanation written down so that I'm confident in my own Web3 elevator pitch is what I'm calling it. But secondly, I'm sure I'm not the only person with this problem. And so hopefully this will help you next time you're asked the question, what is Web3? So how to explain Web3 to the masses? That's kind of the title and how I started this. So the key to explaining Web3 to the normies, I say in quotations, is focusing on the results of what the technology enables, not the technology itself, right? Most people don't care or will likely never understand how a blockchain works. Similarly, most people don't understand how HTTP or SMTP or ITP or IP, most people don't understand what any of that stuff is, right? Yet we can easily understand that the internet allows us to communicate and share information to anyone around the world in real time, right? Very easy to understand. HTTP, by the way, SMTP, all these are the protocols that allow the internet to work. Most people don't even realize that. So I've explained Web3 multiple times now without the person knowing it's enabled by blockchain or that has anything to do with Bitcoin. That one-liner explanation above, though, that I just mentioned about the internet is exactly what we need for Web3. However, it's not that easy. We've all experienced the internet, right? So that one-liner is pretty easy to grasp for most people. But most people, however, have yet to use Web3, right? So what Web3 is enabling are features that have never really existed before, something that people have never experienced before, which makes it very difficult for most people to comprehend, even if you do find a simple way to explain it. So you got to ask yourself before you start explaining, what is the key result of Web3? And that key result is digital ownership, right? That is the big unlock here. But even just saying digital ownership doesn't mean much for many, right? So especially the average kind of normie person who's not tech friendly. So we need to provide context here and compare it to the world we are in right now. So that means that we need them to understand the problem with the existing internet before they can understand the results that Web3 enables, right? Let's remember, most people don't think about the risks associated with centralized companies or using custodial companies for our finances, or even the issues associated with government-controlled fiat systems. Now, to us, maybe listening to this podcast, if you've been listening for a long time, that might come natural to you. To most people, and remember, before you went down the Web3 rabbit hole, you probably had no idea what any of that stuff even meant, right? Most people just simply use the internet without realizing that there was a problem or that there are features missing from our existing internet. So to start my Web3 elevator pitch, I begin with the following line. Web3 is enabling us to own things on the internet, similar to how we can own things in the physical world. Now, I think that this line does a great job of giving people an end state of where this explanation is going, right? But it's important to provide more context and some comparisons and examples. So then I go on to explain the following. In the physical world, we can hold or custody our belongings without relying on a company or a trusted third party to do it for us, right? We can hold cash in our hand. We can travel with our own physical passport. We could store gold under our bed, or even write on a piece of paper or draw some art and hold on to it. This is what we call self-custody. Self-custody is real ownership, true ownership, right? With true ownership, we are free to transact or exchange any of those belongings with anyone we please, and no one person or company can stop that, right? We can also take those belongings from one location to another with us, right? That's very easy to understand, but most people don't realize that this is actually not possible in the digital world, right? Unfortunately, the internet we use today was not built with this functionality. Instead, companies have to fill that void for us by building their own databases and systems to store our digital belongings for us. Okay. So some examples you can give is banks hold our money, Facebook store our content, our personal data, our conversations, right? Twitter stores our followers and our content. Games store earned assets, right? So it depends on who you're talking to and what they would understand or what they use the internet for, but you can explain it for anything that you do on the internet. Okay. And so then you can go on to just explain that there are two problems with this. One, we can't take the things that we own with us from one application to another like we can from one city or store to another in the physical world, right? If I want to use both Instagram and Twitter, I need to create a new profile and account for each application. I also need my followers to follow me on both applications, which is odd. In the physical world, there's only one me. In the digital world, there are hundreds of me, right? Along with hundreds of passwords and usernames, and that's terrible, right? And this is because everything I create digitally, I do not own. They are owned by the company of the application I created them in. The second issue of this is that we have to trust these large companies with everything we have and do on the internet: money, content, profiles, followers, etc. So banks can restrict our money, Stripe can block us from transacting with stores, Facebook can limit what we say. Obviously, this is not ideal and very different from the physical world where we can say and do whatever we want. So now let's tie all this together, right? Because usually people have a decent understanding there, but if you want to really allow people to understand, you say, well, why is it called Web3? So with all that in mind, Web3 is simply just the next iteration of the internet, which enables digital ownership, right? There are tens of thousands of developers all around the world currently rebuilding the underlying technology of the internet to enable this digital ownership for every internet user around the world. It's called Web3 because you can think of this as the third version of the internet. Web 1 was the days before Google and Facebook, where we could only read web pages, right? We didn't have the ability to interact with pages like we do now. So you couldn't comment, you couldn't like, you couldn't share, you couldn't search. For anyone that is older than, I don't know, 20 or so, you would know this and you would remember this. So Web 1 was basically read only. Web 2 was the first big upgrade to the internet that allowed us to interact with the internet. This was enabled by big tech companies we know today, like Google, Facebook, Amazon, etc. Right? So Web 2 is what we call read and write. And then Web 3 is the second upgrade to the internet, which allows for digital ownership. It allows us to self-custody our money, our art, our equity, our content, our data, and much more without the need for trusted third parties. We can custody these assets directly on our device that we hold in our hand, similar to holding paper money or art in our hand, right? So Web3 is read, write, and own. And then I like to finish with, over the coming decade, essentially every application thing we do on the internet will be rebuilt with this Web3 technology, enabling new asset classes and new digital economies. And then I'd probably stop here and ask if they're still following and have any questions. Like I said, simplifying a complex subject like Web3 is not easy. There's no way of making a one-liner for Web3, not yet anyway. This explanation, though, gives people a framework to understand all the things being built in Web3. Next, you can start to explain different use cases, whether that be Bitcoin, the self-sovereign money, or NFTs, non-fungible ownership, or Ethereum, this global settlement layer, and decentralized app store is a nice way to explain it. And there's many other ones that you can do. You got to kind of think of what makes sense for that person. If they're in politics, maybe you want to think about talking about DAOs and governance structures, right? If they're in music, maybe you want to talk about music NFTs. If they're an artist, you can talk about artist and art NFTs and so on. So my recommendation is to go with the use case that they would be interested in or understand. If they don't understand history of money and how the Fed balance sheet works, probably just skip the Bitcoin explanation, right? They might not care or they might not get it. So if they like collector's items or art, go with that, okay? You got to read the person, deliver the info that they care about. Now, I'm working on another article focused on the top 10 use cases in Web3. So keep an eye out for that, as that might be a helpful resource to share actual use cases going on in this space right now. But I'm sure many of you can think of them yourselves, which, by the way, if you want to help me with that article, tweet at us at Web3 Academy with an underscore, or again, go back to one of the articles in your inbox and hit reply and let me know some of your favorite top use cases in Web3. So again, tweet at us or find us in the newsletter. Some of you, the newsletter you get might be going to your spam or your promotional. Make sure you go in and you pull that over to the inbox so that you consistently get them in your inbox and no longer goes to your spam. And then hit reply and let me know some of your top use cases. And also make sure you let me know other ways that you would explain Web3 that maybe are better than mine. But thanks, friends. I appreciate all of you for listening to the Web3 Academy podcast. We hope you enjoy it. We hope you will continue to share it with your friends and give it reviews on Spotify, on Apple, and on YouTube. I wish you all the best, and I will see you in the next episode. Thank you for listening to Web3 Academy. We hope this helps you along your Web3 journey. And if it does, please share this episode and subscribe so you don't miss the next one. By the way, if you've yet to join the Discord community, you are missing out. This is where all the magic happens. This is where we learn, where we ask questions, where we network. You want to be in there. The link to join is in the description below. And finally, a quick disclaimer. Nothing in this podcast was financial advice. Crypto and Web3 can be risky. You can literally lose it all. In fact, if you invest on account of what we say, you probably will lose it all. So don't do that. In all honesty, the point of this podcast is to remove the noise of markets and price and focus on utility and implementation anyway. So you should not take any of this as financial advice. Thank you, friends, and see you in the next one.